Hi, everybody, and welcome to the third in my series of Superhuman Healing. And I'm so excited to have my great friend, Dr. Joe Dispenza, participating with me today. This is our second teleseminar together, and you may, if you haven't heard of Joe Dispenza, and I don't know anybody who hasn't, Dr. Joe Dispenza started out life as a chiropractor and had an amazing healing himself, and then became devoted to understanding the power of the brain and the body to heal, and has gone on to be an internationally best-selling author, an amazing lecturer, a researcher, and just an all-round fantastic guy. And he lectures all over the world. He's lectured in hundreds of countries and is just, you know, a fabulous guy. And if you don't know me, I have written 4 books in this area, which are also international bestsellers: The Field, The Intention Experiment, The Bond, and my latest book, The Power of 8. And by the way, Joe's latest book is Becoming Supernatural. And so we started our conversation because our books came out about the same time last year, and we've both had some amazing experiences. But before we start, I want to just say happy belated Thanksgiving to everyone and share something really fun about life. So, Joe, aside from being from New Jersey, there's something else we've got in common. Tell them what that is.
Besides being from New Jersey?
Yeah.
What is that?
That is that we're both Italian.
Oh, yeah.
And we both have a very interesting way of celebrating Thanksgiving. Do you want to just talk about what the menu would be in your family? Because we found that we kind of had the same thing growing up.
Yeah, the turkey was always the last part of the meal, but there was usually pasta before, eggplant parmesan. There was antipastas and all kinds of Italian food. And then we finished with turkey, if you could last that long.
Absolutely. And then the old gents in the Italian family would yank out the grappa and drink the, you know, the Italian stuff. I mean, we used to have wars in our family over Italian meatball soup. So it was not just waste expanding, it was waste exploding, right?
Exactly.
So, but we've got some other things in common too. And one of them is the fact that we've been witness to extraordinary healings in our workshops. And it's really made both of us think a lot about what on earth healing is and why we observe these extraordinary instant healings in just carrying out certain things that would be seeming to be ordinary in many cases. So Joe, tell us a little bit about what's gone on in some of your workshops.
Well, honestly, Lynn, I never thought that in my lifetime that I would be witnessing what I'm currently witnessing in people around the world. And it's not just in my work, but in my workshops, I get an opportunity to coax people into a different state of being. And as we were talking about, that you see people with blindness and hearing problems and tumors and cancers and Hashimoto's syndrome and chronic pain and all these different health conditions that in a matter of a few days, all of a sudden they have a significant change in their health. And I see that really simply that our personality creates our personal reality. And our personality is made up of how we think, how we act, and how we feel. And so most conditions that are health conditions are connected to a person's present state of how they think, how they act, and how they feel. The fundamental question is if they start thinking differently, if they start making different choices, if they start doing different things, if they start creating new experiences and trading certain emotions for more productive emotions, is it possible that not only will there be a change in the way the person's feeling, their well-being, but is there a change in gene expression? And our research shows that in 4 days, for people doing that they begin to activate genes that suppress tumor growth and cancer growth. They stimulate genes that activate oxidative stress that help to repair and stop aging. They activate cells that grow new brain cells, the stem cells also that are stimulated from the gene expression that begin to go to damaged tissues and repair them. We see more hormonal changes and more hormonal balance, and that's just in 4 days. So from a theoretical standpoint, genes are like Christmas tree lights. They go on and off all the time. And when they are signaled from something in the environment, that's usually what causes the gene to express itself. And genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of the body. So is it possible then to signal the gene ahead of the environment? And that's the concern or the question that we ask, because if you're elevating your emotional state and combining it with a clear intention, your brain and body really don't know the difference between what's going on in your outer world and what's going on in your inner world. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that environmental situation. And now you're selecting and instructing new genes. Now, it has to be sustained for a period of time. So then a person has to develop a new habit in order to get there. And so in a 1 week period of time, well, we just finished an event in Brighton, just down the road here. I'm in London, down the street from you. And we saw people with very significant changes in everything from Raynaud's syndrome to heart conditions, to eye conditions, to chronic pain, to depression, because they had an opportunity really to begin to examine their unconscious thoughts, or notice their automatic behaviors and habits, and look at certain emotions that they live by that they didn't even know that they lived by because it felt too much like them. And when they began to make some significant changes, the disease kind of exists in the old personality, and they're literally someone else. So we've seen that from just a biological standpoint.
And it's very interesting because I've had very similar experiences, even in conferences. If I run a Power of 8 group, and my big interest is group effects, small group effects, where I put people into groups of 8. And this all came about by accident when I did this 10 years ago in a workshop, and now I've run thousands of these groups. And we have these kinds of amazing changes that happen there and then. So I've got people in groups of 8 or so for 10 minutes. And I've had people with stroke who couldn't see straight. I had a woman with stroke who couldn't see straight after her stroke. And her vision improved and she suddenly could see normally. I've had people where they've had scoliosis and their back is actually changed right in front of me. And I want to say, this really freaked me out when I first watched this because, I come from a skeptical background. I'm an investigative reporter by training. I'm not a healer. I wasn't anyway. And to witness this was really almost frightening for me. We've had people with a dislocated shoulder. I had a woman last year with a dislocated shoulder and it slotted into place. We have people who cancel their knee replacement surgery and on and on and on. And I witnessed this when going forward in the masterclass I run, because I run 1 year-long event where I put people into groups of 8. I train them, I put them into groups of 8, and I've just observed them for a year. And we have feedback, we have all kinds of things like that where I provide them with tips and training and all kinds of things through the year. But mainly, I put them into groups. And the groups are where amazing things happen. And I've witnessed some extraordinary things, not only with healing, but also with their lives, where their lives start healing, where they, overcome their financial issues, where they suddenly get a dream job, even though they're in their 50s or whatever, where they suddenly find their dream relationship, where they get an amazing financial windfall, where they find their life's purpose, and on and on and on with their health, etc. And so, Joe, it started me thinking, if those kinds of things in a workshop of yours or in a Power of 8 group or my masterclass can happen where people heal in an instant, that says something really different about what healing is. And like you, we've done some scientific studies. We found when people go into groups of 8 and they do this intention together, as I train them to do, something really strange happens with their brain. They turn off the parts of their brain, essentially. They're turned down, the parts of their brain that are involved with worry, doubt, negativity. And they turn on or they actually turn down those parts of the brain that make them feel separate. That, the parietal lobes that make us, that help us navigate through space and say what's us and not us, those are turned way down. And essentially, these turn out to be brainwave signatures of people who are in a state of ecstatic oneness. So this to me is a really interesting piece, which is when we get off of ourselves and into something larger, then maybe healing occurs. And it sort of makes me think of what you were just saying, Joe, that, healing is about a mental, emotional state. So talk a little bit more about that, because that really says, we're moving well beyond the physical and trying to understand what healing and what health is.
Yeah, those are absolutely great points. Well, first of all, I think that we're human beings as a species. We're a living organism. And the age of selfish individuality has to end, because we cannot sustain as a species if everybody is out for themselves. All species cooperate and they commune. And so when you get a group of people together and they are of a similar intent or a similar energy, we are really wired to nurture and take care of one another. And that is what I call social coherence. And it's very indivisible when people have that kind of intent and strength. So yeah, we've seen that 70% of the time, most people are living by the hormones of stress. And stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. So stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. Stress response pretty much is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. And so we have different types of stress. We have physical stress like injuries, accidents, traumas. We have chemical stress like viruses, bacteria, hangovers, blood sugar levels, toxins in food. And we have emotional stress, which is traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, parenting, family tragedies. And all of those different environmental signals really begin to knock us out of balance. And all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. When there's an emergency, we have three options: we either run, fight, or hide. And that system of emergency, of survival, is designed for the short term. But most people that have any type of stress end up with every stress ending up as psychological or emotional stress. So the arousal of the chemicals when you react to some threat or danger in your outer environment gives the brain and body a jolt or an arousal of energy. And in time, people start to look for or become attached to or addicted to that rush of adrenaline. So they begin to use the people and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. And in a sense, they become addicted to the life they don't even like. So then what's the significance of that? Well, it's really simple. If you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. So from a theoretical standpoint, if all of your attention and energy and you're mobilizing all this energy for some threat in your outer environment, there's no energy in your inner environment for growth and repair. So the immune system becomes compromised and becomes compromised dramatically. So all of the conditions that we see, many of the conditions in chronic health, those conditions are immune-mediated conditions, from cancer to rheumatoid arthritis to MS, to food allergies, to sensitivities, all the way down the line. And so when a person then begins to say, okay, I may not be able to control everything in my outer world, but I certainly can self-regulate and begin to control what's going on in my inner world. And by the same means, we've done an experiment where we took a group of people and said, okay, let's have you trade anger, fear, frustration, judgment, hatred, sadness, pain, suffering, depression, anxiety, whatever, competition, for gratitude, appreciation, love, and a joy for existence. And we gave them opportunities for 10 minutes a day for 2 or 3 times a day for 4 days. And we measured their cortisol levels when they started the process. And we measured a chemical called IgA, immunoglobulin A. It is your primary defense against bacteria and viruses. It is the body's natural flu shot. In fact, if you read the research, it's actually better than a flu shot. So then we put them through those 4 days, and then we measured their changes just by trading those emotional states. At the end of 4 days, their cortisol levels improved, went down about 20%, and their IgA levels went up 50%. So 50% change in your autoimmune response just by self-regulating with an elevated emotion. Now, the emotional signature of gratitude is interesting because gratitude means you're receiving something, you've just received something, something is happening to you or something has already happened to you and it makes you feel good. So you feel it and you say, thank you. So its signature means something has already happened. So if your body is the unconscious mind and you begin to feel gratitude, then you're going to feel like all your dreams, all the things you want have already happened. And you're going to move you're going to move from the state of separation and lack. That's that signature that says, I'm here and you're there. And if you look different than me, then it's going to get worse. And the hormones of stress actually endorse the senses and we become materialists. So we experience more separation. So we experience not only separation from people and objects and things, but separation from me and my future dreams. We feel like we have to wait for our dreams to occur in order for us to feel gratitude. Then I'll feel gratitude when I get my new relationship, when I get my new job, when I get my new career. So the body spends most of its time polarized in lack. So then when a person starts to feel gratitude, their body eases and it says, I've already received my future. It's already happened. And I feel more whole and less separate from it. And so we tend to stress more or less. We tend to no longer force or control outcomes in our life, because if you're connected to the emotion of how your future would feel, then you wouldn't be rushing anywhere to get anywhere. You would feel like you already have it. So the immune system then begins to dial up. It begins to repair. And so what happens is pain dials down, inflammation dials down, immune function goes way up, and a host of different biological markers change. So then it sounds easy theoretically, but it's a habit. And we've done the measurements to show that people can actually sustain these states for an extended period of time. And so then when they break the addiction to those emotions, that's the tough part about change, because the moment you step out of the known familiar territory, which means that some people would rather feel guilt, and at least it's familiar to them and it's known, than take a chance in possibility, because they can't predict what's going to happen if they leave the known. So it turns out that if you give people the proper tools, and you understand this, it's a formula. It's an absolute formula, and it's not a difficult formula. We're actually wired to do this. We're naturally wired to do this, but it takes us from breaking all the addictions from all the people and objects and things and problems in our life long enough to begin to say, okay, I'm out of balance here, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to get back in balance. Now, the moment you decide to do something differently, you're going to feel uncomfortable because you're leaving that known territory. So most people, once they feel that discomfort, they return back to the familiar world and they say, this feels right. Well, no, that feels familiar. So then when people start to disentangle from the emotional addictions and the programs that they live by unconsciously, it takes a Herculean effort to begin to do that. But the side effect of that is joy, because the body is no longer believing it's living in the same past traumatic situations over and over again. So the stronger the emotion we feel from events in our life that occur, the more altered we feel inside of us emotionally. The more altered we feel inside of us emotionally, the greater the threshold, the more we pay attention to the cause, and the brain takes a snapshot. And that's called a memory. So then people think neurologically within the experiences, neurologically, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. So most people's entire state of being was in the past. So then the body then is believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because the body doesn't know the difference between the emotion from the real experience and the emotion that we're living by every single day. So it turns out when you trade that, all of a sudden you begin to downregulate certain genes and upregulate other genes, and you begin to see a change. You just got to go through, just like an addict that's been addicted to heroin or addicted to a substance. You have to go through that period of withdrawal, and that is the dissonance and disorder we see in the brain and heart. But if a person sticks with the formula, there's a reorganization, and that's called the healing. And it could happen in an instant. Getting there is the journey. And I think what's happening, to your point, when we first started out, is that more and more people we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. You don't need a doctor. You don't need a priest. You don't need a rabbi. You don't need a governor. You don't need a teacher to gain information anymore. We have access to information. So the beauty behind that is people are taking their power back. And when you have a change in information, or you understand information, you have a greater level of awareness. And awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how, and people are ready to learn how. And it's the 100th monkey, or the 4-minute mile. It's starting to happen. And now everybody's seeing it happening, and now the belief about it is enhanced. And now we don't have to rely on so many things outside of us, an exogenous substance, to change how we feel inside of us. People are beginning to learn how to self-regulate and do it without anything external to them. And that's a threat to pharmaceutical companies. As you know, you have a fabulous magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You. And you've been on the front lines with this for a long enough period of time. And that's a threat to the pharmaceutical companies and to the medical model. But all of those models are breaking down because of information. And this is a great time to be alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you said so many things, and there are so many things. They've got me thinking about so many things, Joe. One of the interesting segues into, I want to talk a bit about community. One of the interesting pieces of research I just discovered was the fact that cancer patients did far better when they had their vagus nerve activated. Now, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, and it starts in the neck, and it winds its way through all the major organs of the body, and it turns on things like the release of oxytocin, that hormone that we feel when we feel love and kindness and appreciation and compassion, and you know, when we take care of babies and things like that. So here's some interesting things about it. Number one, that vagus nerve, when it gets turned on, keeps refreshing the immune system, but also it does something really interesting, which is, yes, it's turned on with moments of compassion, appreciation, gratitude, what you were talking about. It also makes people more unified. It makes people feel closer to people who are not like them. Amazing research at the University of California, Berkeley, demonstrated that with students, that when they were shown pictures that elicited compassion, like pictures of starving children, they began to get closer to people not like them. And that's something that we've investigated a lot with my intention experiments. We ran one in November of last year, and we ran one in November this year too, where we had Arabs and Jews doing intention together, in the first instance for Jerusalem and recently for Yemen. And it was amazing. And we had Americans in the last one too. But it was amazing. The Arabs afterward, you know, who were wary of even doing this together, started sending love to the Jews. The Jews started saying things like, your God is my God. There was an amazing connection and feeling of oneness. And it kind of brings me back to a lot of the ideas about health that are bigger than just the idea of a sick body. I love Dr. Leo Gallen, the integrative physician in America, who talked about the 4 pillars of healing. So he talked about, you know, food and water, and he talked about exercise, but he also talked about environmental things and community. And community was a really powerful piece for him. And that's certainly what I've seen. When I've done a lot of research, and I looked at this both in The Power of 8 and my book before that, The Bond, human beings need to belong more than they need to eat. You know, the evidence shows we need to share, care, and be fair. Being part of a group of any size protects us against everything from stroke to the common cold. And in fact, you know, studies of the Japanese who smoke like chimneys show that they don't really have a high incidence of heart disease until they move to the States. And some do, and some don't. And when epidemiologists look further, they find out that the ones that do get heart disease are the ones that have replicated the very dog eat dog, lone wolf type of life of the typical American. Those that don't, that replicate their life in the old country where they've got a very close community ties, find that it really doesn't matter what they eat. They can eat Big Mac and fries or tofu and sushi, whatever, they are protected from heart disease. So that starts saying that disease is something more than a sick body or a bad diet. It's an ailing soul. And one of the biggest things that is ailing about us these days is our sense of aloneness and solitude and disconnection and separation. You know, we think we're all lonely people on a lonely planet in a lonely universe. But one of the things that I found so immediately powerful is putting people into groups. And for instance, in the masterclass, I put people into, when I say groups, they're virtual groups. You know, we put people in the same time zones together and they meet week after week. And these become their new family. You know, and a lot of these people don't have much family anymore or an estranged family. And suddenly they're connecting and it's a total stranger who's got your back week after week after week. And this becomes extraordinarily strengthening. You know, people feel over and over again, the participants say to me something like, the group intention is like a soup that changed my brain. Or I do a lot of individual work, but I can't get to this place without the group. And that starts making me think of a lot of things about the power of community, how we were always meant to be part of a bigger whole. And that we are part of a bigger whole, but we don't experience it. We're all part of the field, the 0-point field. We're all, you know, in a quantum level, our subatomic particles are just part of this giant field together. But we don't experience life that way. As you said, Joe, we are experiencing it inside our own heads, and we're mainly experiencing our past. So one of the fascinating things about epigenetics that you talked about, and you know what we're talking about is a quartet of atoms that sit above every gene. And genes, as you say, they're like Christmas lights. They're like keys of a piano. They sit there silently waiting to be played. And the thing that plays them is this little quartet of atoms. And they're exquisitely sensitive to our environment. You know, not only the food we eat and the water we drink, but the friends we have. You know, the sum total of how we live our lives determines whether those piano keys get played. And one of the big powerful things that does play them is a sense of being part of something bigger. Now, one other thing that I want to talk to you about that has a lot to do with what you're talking about in terms of gratitude is getting off of yourself. And one of the things that I discovered in these masterclass groups that is quite extraordinary is people begin to heal their lives as they meet week after week. They heal, you know, all kinds of areas in their lives, not just their health, but some don't. And after a while, I work with them for a bit, and the group works with them. And I'm thinking of Andy Spiros, who was trying to get a new job. She was recently divorced, and you know, she needed money, and she was a very talented coach and marketer. Couldn't get a job. Tried everywhere, and not for want of trying, or you know, young woman should have got a job, couldn't. So finally, I was exasperated, and I just said, "Oh, Andy, get off yourself." And I just told her, start intending for somebody else who's more needy. So she started intending for a young kid who had tried to commit suicide and had broken every bone in his body. Doctors didn't think he was going to live. We were setting up intention for this kid. And the amazing thing was immediately, out of the blue, Andy gets a call, not even soliciting it, not even applying for a job. She gets a job. She gets an offer of a dream job. And this has happened over and over and over again to the point where I think that altruism is a big piece here too.
Yes. Yes, there's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, I believe that just like an infection could spread amongst the community and create illness or disease, that health and wellness can be as infectious in a community as any disease. And community is one of the strong things that I think are so important, because not only are we wired to to take care of and to tend and to nurture. But when we're actually being kind and we're giving, it actually opens up the centers in our body where the field around our body actually expands. So we live by the hormones of stress. I mean, the vital life force, the invisible light that's surrounding every cell, this is science now, is being utilized. And it's being utilized and turned into chemistry, and the field shrinks. So when the field shrinks, we feel more like matter and less like energy, more like particle and less like waves. So now in our world, we're matter trying to change matter. And of course, that's the difficult part, because it takes time for us to get what we want. So again, anybody who wants something, they're wishing, they're hoping, they're wanting, they're trying, they're begging, they're praying, but doing it in a sense of lack or separation. When we start to give, when we start to take care of it, we start to intend for somebody else, the moment we do that, there's a shift in our biology. There's the oxytocin that's created from just being kind and giving signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called derived endothelial relaxing factor. Big word, big set of words. It just mean the arteries that go to the heart literally swell. They actually, the muscular lining relaxes. So we have a sensation of fullness in our heart that makes us come right from our heart instead of somewhere else. When we do that, those elevated emotions tend to create more coherence in the heart, and the heart begins to produce a measurable magnetic field. So our energy is actually moving out. It's actually moving away, and we feel more connected. We feel more whole. We feel more kind, giving, more caring. We trust more. And in a sense, we're actually emulating some divine quality within us. And the person who's receiving then in community feels worthy and feels grateful, and then the act is continued with another person, and that's what begins to create strong social bonds. And the oxytocin that you're talking about is actually a chemical that causes us to bond. So, but if you look around and you look at the evidence in our world, whether you're looking at television or advertisements or the news or whatever, the emotions that are derived from all the exposure to that stimulation creates more separation. Why would you trust a person if they're another skin color? Why would you trust another person if they're from another culture? Why would you trust another person? There's war, there's deceit. And so everybody is in the selfish world, and the organism is fractured. Now, I don't know if that is intentional or not, but it is a sign of the times that we live in. So then, living in survival, then, it's just not, it goes counter to the survival gene to open your heart when you're in survival. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to give. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to close your eyes and go within. It's not even a time to communicate. It's a time to do everything opposite of that. And so if 70% of the time people are living that way, then they're looking for evidence of someone actually doing it, but nobody's doing it. So what's happening in the world right now is that in anybody that's in the work that we do, the event that we just came from in Brighton, I just left today, we had a community of 900 people at the end of that event that were in love with each other. They thought the same way. They did the same things. They changed in the ways that they could, and they overcame themselves. And the side effect of overcoming ourselves is this tremendous liberation of energy. And we feel connected to something greater. And that connection is with a community that is of similar consciousness, a similar energy, a similar set of values. And that principle in biology is called emergence. And that's the group of starlings, the birds that are all flying in the same direction, or the fish that are in a school, they all turn at once. Well, when you study that phenomenon, you think that there's some leader that everybody's following, that it's a top-down phenomenon. Turns out there is no leader, that everybody is leading. Now, this is the important time in history right now, because we have a stigma that if you lead with too much passion in your life, you're going to get it. Whether you're Gandhi or Martin Luther King or William Wallace or John Lennon or Abraham Lincoln or anybody, you're going to lose your life if you step out of that box and live for, die for, when you stand up for truth, you wind up dying for it. But if you have enough people leading and they're one mind and one heart, you just can't take out everybody, because it's a community that has strength in numbers. Because when you look at those fish, you look at those birds, the appearance of them moving and all in a pattern gives the impression of a larger organism. And that's exactly how species survive. So us as species, if we don't have connection with our very people that are part of our species, we have nothing. Because social isolation, if you look at just research on Alzheimer's and age-related memory decline, people who spend the majority of their time alone, they progress the quickest towards degeneration from neurodegenerative disorders. So look at the United States. The communities in the United States have their family in the United States by itself is just enough of a challenge. But you look at cultures, South American cultures, Mexican cultures, look at cultures where family is a high priority. They just have a greater sense of joy, a greater sense of happiness. They judge less. They're not so hard on themselves, all that stuff. And the act of finally giving something or taking care of somebody else is literally going to switch your energy and switch your biology in a matter of seconds. And there's going to be some significant cascade effects that's going to ripple down through community, which is a healthy thing. And then throw in companies and organizations where everybody's competing and angry and resentful and holding grudges and distrusting, and they spend a third of their life there. I mean, no wonder that those people are sick all the time, because they have no immune system. It's not germs that are making them sick. It's the environment that's making them sick.
Yes, absolutely. And, something else you talked about, which is, the effects of selfishness. I mean, something really spoke to me, a study that I found that compared two groups of people. One were people who lived what they called, the good life. They had all the money in the world. They had loads of holidays. They were living the good life for themselves and their, and their nearest and dearest around them. And when they looked at their immune system markers, all the things you've discussed before, Joe, they were terrible. These guys were going to be dropping like flies. I mean, they were perfect candidates for all those degenerative diseases, from heart disease to diabetes to Alzheimer's. Then they looked at a group of people who were perhaps not that, not living quite so good a life, but living a life of service. So they were getting off of themselves and doing stuff for other people. These people had amazingly robust immune systems. These people were going to live forever. So I really started thinking about that other orientation as being a real important piece when we're looking at health, of getting off of yourself, of being part of a larger whole, being part of a group where you can give as well as receive, and suddenly you are not fixated on that illness. And it speaks to something else you talked about that I want to look at, which is the whole idea of illness and time. Because you talked about, the past invading us and creating illness. And that's something that we've looked at a lot. And my husband's written a whole book about it, The Untrue Story of You, Brian Hubbard, where he defines the past. He defines us as having three selves. And one of the biggest selves is our past. And the past essentially invades us like an unwanted guest. And if everything is energy, those past experiences that defined us, that limited us, that hurt us, are still there, pulsing away and creating the limits and the lacks that we experience, and usually the illness. So I started thinking about that, and everything is energy, because there's so much robust evidence about things working out of time. There's a lot of robust evidence about in consciousness studies demonstrating that, for instance, when you look at REG machine effects that were run by Princeton University, these are random event generators, which are like 21st century electronic tosses of the coin. And they randomly show up images, let's say, if they're on a computer program of, say, cowboys and Indians. And Dr. Robert John, the late Robert John, had millions of these studies that he ran with different operators, where you have them sit in front of the computer and will the machine to show more cowboys than Indians. And he showed a small but significant trend toward the thing that they they intended, the image they intended. However, the most interesting part of this is that an enormous number of these instances, they would run the program, then have the people intend, maybe a week later, and it still affected it. They did remote viewing studies where they had somebody in the lab who was the remote viewer, and the other person would be someone who is the traveling partner, who'd have to go somewhere in the universe, written in an envelope that he would take, and it would tell him exactly where to go. He might be 3,000 miles away, it might be around the corner. And then his remote viewing partner would have to draw and describe where he was. So they ran loads and loads of these studies too, and some of the most successful, believe it or not, were when the remote viewer would draw and describe where his traveling partner was going even before he picked up the envelope. So lots of things work out at time. Lots of studies by consciousness researchers demonstrate essentially that our future affects our present as it's unfolding. Weird stuff that makes a lot of sense if you think about everything being energy. So I started thinking about illness being energy, and I have played around a lot with retro healing. So what we've done is we've got a system we use in the master class where we go back and we visit seed moments, and we do a whole process with these seed moments where we change the energy. And you know, this seed moment, by a seed moment, it's anything from the moment you first contracted something before it became a full-blown condition. Or it can be the moment a teacher told you you were stupid in math. Or it can be something where you were abused by a parent. Anything. I mean, I had a woman in a workshop recently who used to get locked in this dark basement. And because of that, she's, you know, very frightened of dark places, very frightened of confined spaces. So we will go back and change the energy around that experience. And what happens over and over again is we see healings. I mean, one of the most remarkable was a woman who had an infection, and she developed vitiligo where she's not pigmenting properly. And in the workshop, she started repigmenting. She started showing it. It was extraordinary. So it tends to suggest to me that illness, more than a biological process, is a thought. And when we change that thought, when we change that state so the thought can be changed, whether it's gratitude, whether it's altruism, doing for somebody else, whether it is going back and revisiting that and playing a different tape in a way, if we can do any of those things, we change that energy, and that changes the body.
Yes, and it's very interesting because we're studying that energy in detail, because when we look at people with health conditions, the question is, where is the pattern of that condition in the energy field? Turns out that the pattern of the trauma exists in the energy field that is a frequency that exists more in the three-dimensional world. In this, we could say, like Einstein said, E equals mc squared. You know, anything that accelerates to the speed of light, that's matter, is going to turn into energy. So the ceiling of this reality is the speed of light, but the quantum is actually what exists beyond the speed of light. That's where things are no longer separate. That's where things are more interconnected. Even time doesn't exist there, or to a lesser degree. So if from a theoretical standpoint, a person can raise their energy to the point they're more connected and less separate, that when they begin to go forward and backwards in time, if that's a construct, time is a construct, they're actually not going anywhere. Because in the quantum field, the past, present, and future all exist in the eternal now. All possibilities exist in the eternal present moment. So when people are truly present and intentional, the act of being present and being intentional can literally change the pattern in that frequency called the quantum, where things begin to become reorganized. And that could have significant changes in a person's biology, because Einstein said that the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, which he didn't say the particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. Change the field, change the pattern in the field, you change matter. So energy and its vibration then is, when you have traumas, it's frozen energy, it's frozen patterns that literally need to be reorganized. And the only way that we can do that is getting to a certain level of consciousness, a certain level of the present moment that actually can begin to change that pattern in the field. And the pattern in the quantum, all the past, present, and future all exist in the now. So we think we're going somewhere to do that. But if you're in the quantum, there's nowhere to go because you're everywhere. There isn't even time. There isn't even space. If you don't have space, you don't have time, because time is created by a separation in 2 points of consciousness. So if you're in the unified field, that field of energy that's governing everything material, and you're feeling oneness and wholeness, then you're executing greater effects on the nature of reality, because you're at a frequency that can change the pattern. And the pattern changes in the present moment, although it appears like it's in the memory of the past, but it's really in the present. And I think that's how people see very significant changes when they go back to the memory and they resubstitute a new memory, because that the substitution in the present moment is exactly what's changing the past, present, and the future simultaneously.
Yes, and absolutely. And what you're saying really is that we're changing energy. We're just changing a pattern. You know, we're not changing what happened, although, as you say, what we're really talking about is time and space is one big smeared out now and one big smeared out here. Yeah. But if we are energy and our past exists simultaneously with our present, with our future, then we can change that energy. And one of the powerful ways is not changing what actually happened, but changing what we think about what happened, because that's really the problem, is the incomplete understanding of exactly what happened. You know, we have a child's understanding, or we have, you know, a partial understanding of what exactly happened. But there's a couple of things that are really interesting to me about this, which is that feeling of oneness, you know, experiencing something akin to being cognizant that we're in the quantum field, because we don't. We feel like we're separate. We live our lonely little lives feeling separate, and even our brains help us navigate by feeling separate. And one of the things that I have found is a fast track to that is this group effect of people intending together. There is something about it, Joe, and you know, I don't have a full understanding of this. I study it. We completely continue to study this phenomenon, but what we have noticed is brainwave signatures that aren't analogous to other, you know, states of quietude. What they are more analogous to is like a Sufi master in doing chanting, and a Buddhist monk in an ecstatic prayer. I mean, the studies of Andrew Newberg looked at these kinds of states, and they found brainwave signatures identical to ours, just, you know, to my amazement. And what it was is, you know, something that occurred very quickly, because, you know, a Sufi master takes years to study this. A Buddhist monk has, you know, hours of priming before he gets into that state. Our people, the people we studied, were students who had never even meditated before. And all they had was a little video for me explaining to them how to do the basics of the process. And yet they were transported into this state of oneness in a minute. And literally, you know, the process we do is 10 minutes long. So, you know, I started thinking, wow, you don't need to take ayahuasca here. You know, you don't need a sweat lodge. What you need is a sense of being beyond the individual, and maybe a fast track to that is the group.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing time, because you don't have to be a Buddhist monk, and you don't have to be a nun in reverie, or you don't have to be an academic or a scholar, and you don't have to meditate for 40 years. In fact, sometimes it's better that you don't have any of that, because you're a clean slate. And in our brain scans, in all of our research, the people who are innocent and who just follow the formula, they follow the instructions without doing things the way they've been doing it, are the ones that have the most transcendental experiences. And the only way that we experience that oneness and that wholeness is to get beyond the self. It is that transcendental moment where you're so caught up with whatever you're doing, or you're giving to somebody else, or you're taking your attention off and serving because you're becoming selfless. It's that act of getting beyond yourself, I believe, that causes you to be connected to something greater. And there's varying degrees of that, and you get better at doing it. And I think that when people really get beyond themselves and they begin to connect to that invisible field, that's when they no longer want things for themselves. I mean, the illusion is the sports car and the new wardrobe and the vacation home and all that. That's the illusion. But really what people want is community. What they want is wholeness. They want joy. And when you begin to realize that you don't need something outside of you to create wholeness, that actually you can work on doing that, it is a formula. And once you know the formula and you practice the formula, you don't have to have 40 years of meditation experience to do it. All you have to do is practice the formula. And by practicing the formula, because of technology, because of the age that we're living in where consciousness is changing, because people are doing the uncommon in all walks of life right now, that we've pierced a veil. We've, like the 4-minute mile, there's been a break in that consciousness. And now people believe, number one, it's possible. And they just want to practice how to do it better. They want to be in community with people that get them, totally understand them, that share the same principles, the same values, the same beliefs. And they want to advance their understandings. And those are all perfect ingredients then to have an emerging community that's going to get better at what they do. And that's the beauty behind why you and I are doing all of this, because the next thing that is the most important is evidence, not just all the research that you and I have done. That's dinner conversation. But when you have somebody stand up on stage who has a skin condition for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, or has problems with vision, or has a cancer, and they tell their story. This is an important part to the community, because the story is the allegory that's going to help other people out, no matter what it is. And the story isn't glamorous. There's some hard bumps that they take. They've lost everything. They lost loved ones. They were bankrupt. They lost their home. They lost everything. They don't look like a movie star. They don't look young. They don't look buffed. They don't look like they're in shape. They don't look different than anybody else. And they go through the story in a very specific detail of what they've done to make those changes. There's not a person in the room that is looking away. This is evidence. And now you have it in the quantum field. It's in consciousness. There's a footprint in consciousness that more and more people are leaving footprints, and more people are stepping into those. But secondly, when they see the testimonial and they go, wow, that person doesn't look any different than me. If they could do it, I can do it too. So you see someone with a rare genetic disorder. This is the power of community. You see someone with a rare genetic disorder. It took them 2.5 years. The doctors told her, you'd have this condition the rest of your life. She never missed a day of doing the inner work. She understood what she had to do. She had a rough childhood. She went through the whole thing. 2.5 years to turn the battleship around. Stood on the stage, tells the story. Person in the audience with the same rare genetic disorder, same one, listening to this story says, well, that's evidence, and she doesn't look any different than me. She did it in 3 months. Now, that's because there's evidence in the 3D world that creates community, that says this community says it's possible. I have the support. I have the love. I have the encouragement. I have the cooperation. Nobody's competing. I have the opportunities to connect numerous times. I have the opportunities to overcome myself. I have breaks where I can hang out and make new friends. Some people understand me and get me. That's not the same as the community that I live in every day. And then the evidence then becomes the new foundation for what's possible for somebody else. And that's what feeds back into the community. That's an emerging consciousness that it's not no longer theoretical or philosophical. I mean, nobody wants that. When you and I have been at this for a long enough time to know that when philosophy and theory was what everybody talked about, but nobody really got into the how-to or to what to do. And so now everybody wants the experience, and that's beautiful because everybody knows the information already. They just want to know how to do it. So you get an emerging community of people where the evidence is in the scans, in the measurements and the objective findings. Then you have the physical evidence of the person who's actually saying, look, here's my scan, here's my doctors told me, here's a scan. We had a guy with 50 brain tumors that came to this event. 50 in his brain, 6 in his brainstem, and about 10 in his 6 or 7 in his lungs. He was pronounced dead 3 times. They told him he would never live. Okay, He brought his scans, worked every day. All 49 out of 50 tumors in his brain are gone. All gone in his brainstem. All gone in his heart and lungs. Nobody had believed in him. Not even the doctors. And he had 1 tumor left, and it's a small little benign tumor. It's not even malignant. Now, you watch this guy tell the story, and you're looking out in the audience. You think the person in the audience is feeling fear, or do you think the person's feeling love and oxytocin? And that's naturally going to cause everybody to want to commune and bond a little bit more. And that then speaks to them. It speaks possibility to them. And that's important because that's not in the news. That's not on pharmaceutical commercials.
That's for sure.
That's not anywhere. The evidence has to come in small community, and your community and other communities and everybody's communities rising above all of that for information. So new communities are being formed with a new consciousness, and that new consciousness now that's based in evidence, not only scientific evidence, but evidence in the three-dimensional world. And then that evidence, there's a footprint in the quantum field in consciousness for other people to be able, it's a frequency that other people can tap into. And so then more and more people begin to do this, and the community feeds back on itself. You have a human being that looks like a human being, but they're all of a sudden, different in the way they heal, in the way they heal others, in the way they create reality, in the way that synchronicities and coincidences and opportunities and mystical experiences start happening to them. And all of a sudden, the mystery of the self and who we are, really not this three-dimensional person or identity that we think we are, but the bigger self that we begin to connect to, changes our values. And then all of a sudden, we start to see the hidden meaning behind all things. We start to see the agendas behind all things. We're less seduced by the outer world, and because we feel more whole, before we feel more love, we feel like we've contributed or healed somebody. The people that do the healing, as you know, we see this in our work, the people who administer the healing, they have renal hypertension and glomerular filtration problems. The next day after the event, they go back to their doctors. Their kidneys are functioning normally. They're just a conduit for a frequency through their nervous system that allows them to be healed. And that's a community, a living organism that's doing what a living organism should be doing, and that's taking care of one another so that the organism thrives, period.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we experienced too, Joe. The fact and the power of the small groups. I think of one guy, Mitchell Dean, who he was a clinical psychologist, and it wasn't a good fit because he was a great clinical psychologist, but one of the bad fits he had was he suffered from suicidal depression, and he couldn't find a solution for it. He tried everything, of course. He was into every alternative and into integrative stuff. And the group helped him through their intention to find the source of this, which was a liver filtration system that wasn't working. As soon as he got that sorted through Chinese herbs, he was fine. But not only that, he healed everything in his life. And he got so close to his group that, when he would suffer from insomnia, some of his other group members would just know it, without him saying so, and we'd be intending for him. We'd say, don't worry, we had you covered. And everything in his life, he overcame writer's block. He lost 15 pounds. He increased his muscle mass. His trainer said to him, man, I don't know what you're doing. You're, increasing your muscle mass, but you're losing weight, and you're only exercising once a week. Could you tell me what you're doing? And it was nothing other than the power of possibility, the power of the group. It was about opening a door and also having that connection that was so powerful that I see every day that I work with these groups, that there is something so powerful about knowing that a bunch of perfect strangers are praying for you, essentially, because that's, in essence, it's a form of secular prayer, intention, group intention. Having that kind of support is so strengthening that it can overcome anything in an instant, and it opens people to the sense of possibility. I mean, one other woman, Lisa, said to me, you know, she was trying to write a bestseller, everything had stopped against her. She was trying to finish a book. And the group, just having the group, she said, it removed my own skepticism, my own feeling that I was a loser, I would never get this done. It opened me to my own possibility, my own, my own potential. And suddenly she began to believe in herself. So I think what we're really saying is, we only exist in relationship. We are only healed and whole when we're part of a bigger whole. And that's certainly what we experience. It doesn't have to be a big, big whole. It could just be a little group of 8. But just getting past that little small self into a bigger self can create instant, miraculous healing on every front.
And it's just getting better.
And it's just getting better. Tell us, believe it or not, we've hit the top of the hour, but tell everybody what you're running now. You've got a couple of big events coming up.
Yeah, we just finished Brighton. We have an event in Cancun, Mexico this coming week, but that's sold out. And then
you got something in Switzerland coming up, yeah?
We have an event in Bonn, Germany, March 4th through 10th. That's a week-long event, and that'll go on for registration, I think, the end of the week. And then we're doing a progressive workshop, which is a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday in Edinburgh, Scotland, on March 29th to 31st. Those are the first ones where the work that are available. And
wonderful.
And just exciting, just exciting.
Great. And you got your book coming out in paperback? Tell us about that.
Yeah, Becoming Supernatural will be out in March on paperback, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, and we are just starting we just opened the lines, opened the doors for our new masterclass, our Power of 8 Intention Masterclass, which kicks off first weekend of February, and tickets are flying out the door. It's 6 weeks of intense training by me and online training by me, and then we put you into groups. We monitor you, we give you support, weekly support, ideas, tips, exercises, challenges. You get bonus calls from me, and essentially we monitor you. You feed us back what's going on, we check out what's going on. So if you're interested, we've got Joe Dispenza's website for his events. That's drjoedispenza.com.
That's correct, yeah.
And mine is lynnmctaggart.com. And also my book is out in paperback, The Power of 8, with a new afterword talking about some of the latest new evidence we have and the amazing effects of our intention experiments to heal polarized societies and heal polarized hearts. So it's been so much fun, as it always is, Joe. It's been great.
I love you, Lynn.
I love you too, and thank you, and goodbye from both of us from New Jersey and the world, right?
We don't want to talk too much about that.
We keep it quiet. We keep it quiet. Pleasure, as always.
Great to see you, Lynn.
Take care.
Okay, ciao, ciao.
We done?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, so we just have you and me. I think he's gone off now. Okay, great.